David Moore is a no, and Alderman Hopkins is absent.
So that is some of the outbursts yesterday on the Chicago City Council floor. You hear somebody yelling that somebody needs to tell the president to close the border. That's after they approved $51 million more of additional spending from opioid and vaping settlement money to pay for the migrant influx coming from the southern border because the southern border can't handle it. And some of the officials down there said, well, you know, we can't handle this down here. There's so-called sanctuary cities and welcoming cities across the country, Chicago being one of them. So we've seen an influx of those migrants heading to Chicago. And I want to hear from you about this. The city passing $51 million. That's on top of the tens of millions they've already spent. It's only expected to last a couple of months, if that. And it's an effort that's underway right now with the city of Chicago to address the influx of migrants being housed all over the place in Chicago. We've heard stories of migrants being housed in luxury hotels, sleeping at police stations, even the option of possibly taking homes from in the shape of school gymnasiums with a lot of pushback. But now we've got $51 million from city funds going to this issue on top of all the other money that's there. So I want to hear from you at 217-629-7970. That's the phone number. But let's hear what Brandon Johnson had to say after the vote. Here's a clip that his administration shared about where they're at on this process of funding migrant care in the city of Chicago. And again, this is from his Twitter page.
I'll be celebrating 25 years of marriage in a couple of weeks. I love my wife dearly. Sometimes we have heated conversations, but yet here we still stand. The city of Chicago did not fall apart because people were emotional today. In fact, I would argue that the city of Chicago is stronger because even through that debate, we were still able to have a democratic process where voices were heard. And the challenge that I inherited from the previous administration, we're not going to duck from it. We're not going to dodge it. We're going to take it head on because that's who we are as a city of Chicago. We're going to collaborate, work together to figure out how we can actually solve the critical problems that people expect us to solve.
So again, Brandon Johnson, mayor of Chicago, sharing his thoughts after a contentious Chicago City Council where you had people raising their voice, swearing even, and sharing their opposition and support for the $51 million. So let's go ahead and hear just some of that, revisit what we heard from earlier. Here's David Moore. He is a Chicago alderman, and he talked about how there are communities across the city that he feels are being shorted while they're looking at giving $51 million to undocumented migrants.
We got to hold the federal government responsible. People got to get in those rooms. The county have to have some skin in the game. The governor has to have some skin in the game. And we're not seeing that. And it cannot be put on the backs of the residents of Chicago without showing them that they're getting something out of this. And so I urge my colleagues to vote no on this item. Thank you so much.
So Moore, he also gave an analogy of being on a commercial flight and the flight attendant saying, hey, if that mask comes down, you put the mask on first because it's no good to anybody else if you're dead. So before you try to help anybody else, you've got to keep yourself alive. So he shared that analogy before urging people to vote no. And then you had Alderman Andre Vasquez. He shared that he supports this, but he thinks that a lot more needs to be done by the federal and state taxpayers when it comes to this whole issue.
The federal government has not provided the amount of funds our city needs to deal with the situation, nor has the state. If Texas wants to send their people here, we should get some of the Texas funding coming up here as well to build that infrastructure. And we don't do that. We have people running for president who want to talk about how our country's better. They're not providing Chicago the funding it needs to show that we are. When we talk about the General Assembly meeting so that we can address the situation, when we ask for funding and get a fraction of what we're asking for, that puts us in a situation where we're fighting amongst ourselves, knowing we all need the funds. Knowing that we don't need a lump sum that's going to run out in 2 months. We need a revenue funding stream. We need the local government distributed fund increased to 10%. We need a real estate transaction tax so we have the funding to provide the housing, not only for the existing, but also for the refugees that are coming in. And if we don't do that, we're going to be here month after month fighting amongst each other and talking about our values, knowing we share very similar values, but aren't taking the steps necessary to get the funding to do so.
Again, I want to hear from you at 217-629-7970. That's the phone number, 217-629-7970. Another impassioned speech yesterday during the Chicago City Council before they approved this. This is Jeanette Taylor, and she was very passionate, crying, saying that she has compassion.
As Black people,
but she also was critical of others and saying that they need more for the Black community. Here is Jeanette Taylor with just some of her comments yesterday on the Chicago City Council floor.
It ain't enough to be a Black woman or a Black elected official. It ain't enough to be a Black mayor. I don't care what we become. To some of y'all, we still ain't shit. And it's wrong. It's wrong. I got a community that's divided. I've been getting calls for the last 3 days. You should vote on this. You shouldn't. This is wrong. It's all wrong. And the federal government is responsible. So I hope when people who are in government want to run for president, y'all had this same damn energy. Had the same energy. We got a governor that ain't said one word. Not one. But of course we're going to throw it on the Black man. Because ultimately what we think is the white man's water is colder. I'm sorry, I'm just here to speak my truth. So
Jeanette Taylor continued on with her comments, very impassioned comments, and including dropping more expletives.
At the end of the day, Lady Lightfoot, as y'all like to call her, created this chaos. Because I asked to have a meeting in October. Am I correct? Didn't I ask to have the conversation and talk about transparency? But now we having a different conversation. Say what you want about Alderwoman Taylor. I wake up Black and I go to bed Black every day. And I'm proud to be a Black woman. But that don't mean I'm a hurt and shit on anybody else. I'm not going to do it. Y'all love talking about y'all Christians and y'all Baptists and y'all love the Lord. Really? And mistreating people who ain't done nothing to us?
So she continued on, very impassioned, highlighting the criticism of spending $51 million on it, but also saying that she doesn't want to hurt others, so she supports it. And ultimately, that bill passed at the Chicago City Council, but not without somebody screaming out that somebody needs to tell the president to close the border.
Hopkins is not here. David Moore is a no, and Alderman Hopkins is absent.
So, yeah, I want to hear from you now at 217-629-7970. Again, 217-629-7970. Your call's next. All right, it's 8:20 now. I want to get your phone calls at 217-629-7970 to the city of Chicago approving $51 million. That's on top of the tens of millions it's already spent to accept as a sanctuary city and as a welcoming city more than 10,000 migrants that officials from Texas have transported to various places, including Chicago. And it's because people down in Texas, they can't handle this. And the president's open border policy apparently has allowed for millions of people to come through, and 10,000 plus have been transported to Chicago. So yesterday, the Chicago City Council approved $51 million more, but that's on top of the $42 million that the state of Illinois taxpayers are set to send to Chicago for this. Now, State Representative Adam Niemerg, he touched base with Andrew Hensel, one of my reporters with the Center Square, and he talked about what this means and how ultimately he feels that there needs to be more focus on taxpayers of Illinois when it comes to how these dollars are being spent.
Absolutely. We should be putting Illinois first. We should not be putting Illinois last, and that's exactly what this budget does.
So he also says that the funding in Chicago and the extra funding from the state, he feels, is just the beginning of the taxpayer costs here.
Folks in the state, I'd be asking, where are these illegal immigrants going to be housed? what facilities are going to be used, what dollars, in addition to the $1.1 billion in healthcare, are we going to be spending as a state, because the budget is not balanced. And
so obviously there's a lot of other costs. As you heard there, he even mentioned the estimated $1.1 billion cost for taxpayers in Illinois to subsidize the health care of undocumented migrants in Illinois over the age of 42. All right, let's get to your phone calls at 217-629-7970. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Hi. I feel this way. We don't need to have a bunch of immigrants coming in here in the United States, because it's just the United States needs to worry about its problems first.
Well, have you shared your concerns with your members of Congress?
What's that?
Have you shared your concerns with your members of Congress?
Not yet, but I'm going to bring it up with them.
Yeah, because we have lax border policies right now that a lot of people criticize as the reason why we're seeing this influx of migrants, and the taxpayer cost continues to increase as well, as we saw out of Chicago yesterday. Impassioned speech on both sides of it, saying that either A, we need more funding for the problems like homelessness and drug addiction and schools and infrastructure and police and pensions, and I mean the list can go on and on and on, but they're having to carve out $50+ million, altogether $100+ million just in the short term, in a couple of months worth it's going to cost. So obviously it's a big problem for taxpayers in the state of Illinois. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Hey, good morning, Greg.
Hey.
Hey, 3 quick points on this. First of all, that $51 million, how many parks or field houses could that rehab? How many basketball courts could be put up so young people in Chicago have something other to do other than shoot people and stuff like that?
Or how much of that could go towards, drug rehab clinics or schools, like you're saying, other programs to help shore up the quality of life for citizens of Chicago.
Yeah, and another quick point too. The biggest point for me is this is a federal problem. We should be sending the bill to Joe Biden and the federal government and say, do something about this. You have caused this problem. You need to pay up and help us deal with it. And the third point is, people here in Springfield, you better not think you're out of the woods on this, because what if Chicago decides to start sending them other places around the state? We could be seeing it too.
Yeah. To your second point, the issue here is, obviously it's a federal issue of immigration and the need for something to be done, but you are still paying taxes to the federal government. So that very much is still a taxpayer problem. But you've also got the issue of are these going to be ultimately transported to other parts of the state? And I think that is very much a concern, especially with the Chicago suburbs seeing possibly an influx of migrants there as well. Let's get a couple of more calls here at 217-629-7970. Good morning. You are on WMAY. Go.
Good morning. It wouldn't surprise me if we see illegal immigrants actually starting to be housed at the Wyndham in the next few years.
And you're talking about the facility downtown Springfield, formerly the Hilton, but now the Wyndham City Center. You think that that's going to be ultimately what happens here in Springfield?
I don't know. I mean, I've seen the story about the Inn of Chicago where they don't even let, potentially paying citizens check in because they're all housed with illegal migrants. Yeah. Someone's paying that bill.
Yeah, taxpayers are paying that bill. No question about it. 217-629-7970 is the phone number. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Well, I just want to say that I lived in Chicago, fought illegal immigration from 2000 to 2012 when I left. That's when everything was cooking. And they were making a sanctuary city, a sanctuary county, a sanctuary state. Nobody was around. Nobody cared until people started showing up in their backyard, and then it's a little too late. But I'd like to give your audience an action step. Right now, I don't care if it's Congress, if it's your alderman, because I showed up in Springfield and spoke against welcoming city. And thank God they tabled it. But you got to start asking your alderman, your mayor, your city council, your state rep, where do you stand on illegal immigration? Because if they give you the wrong answer, we need to right now start campaigning to get him out of office, because it's America first, folks.
Appreciate the call. 217-629-7970 is the phone number. Again, 217-629-7970. You can also email bishoponair@gmail.com or find me on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Just search Bishop on Air and we can connect that way. But the best way to have your voice heard is live and local at 217-629-7970.